Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Stephen Jones.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's just a pleasure to be back in Boston. It's been a number of years since I was here, and I was with the Idaho National Engineering Lab, now the Idaho National Lab. I came out here a time or two with regard to my fusion research, and it's just a delight to be back. As the title says, I will discuss another discovery. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but there aren't many people in this room. I think there are 4 of us, counting myself, that know about this, and I want to announce this discovery today. It is important in this research that we're engaged in. I want to remind you, with the scientific method, we gather all the facts that we can. We do experiments. We use microscopes, as you see there. And then we draw a conclusion. What's called the political method starts with a conclusion, and then you find facts that support that, and you ignore other facts. That's not the game we're into. We are looking to get at the truth, and so we want to gather all the facts that we can. I appreciated Richard Gage's remarks earlier today. Excellent talk. He's a very fine speaker, and I really appreciate what he's done pulling all these data together. I want to emphasize a couple of things. There is a distinction between a partial collapse and a complete collapse. I get this from those who support the official theory. That is, they say, well, there are buildings that have collapsed with fire, but not complete collapse. These are all partial collapses. And if there are any examples of a complete collapse of a building due to fire, I'd like to know about it. I've looked high and low. On the left here, you see an inferno that engulfed this building in Madrid, Spain, and the structure stood. After about 24 hours of this conflagration, the building, that is the frame of it, still stood. There was a piece of it that sloughed off up here. That's what you expect. I mean, that can happen, a piece of the building falling off. We could call that a partial collapse. Similarly, in the Boston Globe, just about a week ago, I wrote a letter to the editor. I don't think my letter was published, unfortunately, but there was an experiment done with a model building, 1/8 scale, and they knocked out one of the support columns to see what would happen and to take measurements. You see, a very good idea, an experiment. I like that. Well, what do you think happened? Partial collapse. That is, it did not completely collapse. In the article, they emphasized the building held the structure. Now, on the other hand, with the towers and World Trade Center 7, we have a complete collapse. The structure, the support structure, particularly the core columns, are decimated. Concrete has been pulverized to a considerable extent. And, of course, in the case of the towers, as Richard said, the beams were thrown horizontally large distances. Now, how do the official theorists, I like to point out this is an official conspiracy theory. After all, the 19 hijackers did not work individually and alone. They worked together. That's a conspiracy. So the official story is, how did the towers come down? Besant and Verdure published a paper in which they said this upper block, so they're referring in particular, well, both towers, the upper block remains, they call it a rigid body, an intact upper block of floor that acts as a tamper, also referred to as a pile driver. As I saw that, you see the arrow pushing down, knocking the rest of the building down. And then when you get to the ground level, suddenly then this upper block is finally destroyed. Now, as soon as I saw their argument, it occurred to me how hard it is sometimes to persuade engineering students that I taught for over 21 years, that the third law works all the time. And that means that if there's a force down, the upper block pushing down on the building, then there's an equal and opposite force up, pushing up on that block. Whether it's accelerating, constant speed, stationary, doesn't matter. Newton's third law holds in all cases. There are equal and opposite forces. Now we learn that, but to convince some people that is tricky. But it is true. There is an equal force up. They need to have an arrow here pointing up. Now furthermore, the upper columns, as you go up, the support columns, the core columns get smaller. That is, the steel is thinning out as you go up. So if anything, the upper columns will be affected more than the lower columns. You don't expect that upper block to remain as a rigid block. Their whole explanation misses this. And NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, only takes this collapse of the towers to the point of initiation. They use the term poised for collapse. That's as far as they go. So they don't look beyond this. Byzantine all do, but they then rely on this argument, which, let's see how it looks now. We've slowed this down for you so you can see the upper block. Is it remaining intact, or does Newton's third law hold? The pushing up is causing some destruction of that so-called rigid or intact body. It doesn't stay rigid at all. You see, we can see it in the data. Richard showed that for the south tower. This is the north tower. South tower as well. That upper block of floors leans over. It's destroyed during the initial few seconds. It does not remain as a block. So this model of the tamper just fails completely. And I want to emphasize that, in terms of physics, there is no good official explanation. Let me follow up on that statement, the official explanation. On April 11th of this year, I and a bunch of others, Kevin Ryan, Richard Gage, Scholars for 9/11 Truth and Justice, family members, thank you, Bob McIlvaine and Bill Doyle, we wrote a request for correction, it's called RFC, to NIST, saying, look, there are errors in your report. Would you please correct these errors? They did actually admit and correct one minor point. But here's what they wrote in their response letter to us. In September, they wrote back. This is quoting the NIST letter now to us. Think of yourself as a family member or a scientist, and you're just hoping they're going to correct their report. We, NIST, we are unable to provide a full explanation of the total collapse. They admit it. They can't explain it. And they said, now, that should satisfy you. Go away. Obviously, we're not satisfied. We agree with them that they are unable to. Incidentally, we can explain the total, complete collapse using explosives.